Too big, too slow, essentially a flying tank. That's how Japanese intelligence initially saw the P-47 Thunderbolt. They even laughed at the idea of such a large aircraft posing a threat. But this seemingly clumsy fighter soon proved them wrong in the skies over the Pacific. Its superior firepower quickly became apparent to the Japanese pilots. It could also withstand damage that would destroy other planes. When Japanese pilots realized their bullets were doing little to no damage, they were ordered to avoid engaging. The laughter quickly turned to fear. These initial encounters shattered previous assumptions. The Thunderbolt revealed an unpleasant truth to Japan. April 1943. Misjudging a heavyweight. In April 1943, the Imperial Japanese Army Air Headquarters put out a memo, "Too heavy, not suitable for the Pacific." The memo included a sketch of the P-47 Thunderbolt, which they knew about at that point. The drawing exaggerated its size, and there were question marks around the nose. Official reports labeled it a slow-moving target, better suited for Europe, not the fast-paced battles in the Pacific. In Tokyo, military officers circulated translated articles from American magazines. These articles poked fun at the Thunderbolt's weight, close to 5 tons, and its 8.50 caliber machine guns. They believed this configuration was ideal for taking down bombers, not for chasing agile fighters like the Zero. The assessment: too big, too slow, a flying tank. Pilots received instructions that called for them to be prepared for an easy foe. They believed that it was incapable of matching the climb rate or turn rate of the Nakajima or Mitsubishi fighters that had dominated the Pacific since Pearl Harbor. Experts dismissed the P-47's turbo supercharger as wasted weight. The consensus was that the new American fighter was overkill, essentially useless in aerial combat. Training manuals reinforced this view. They compared the Thunderbolt to the sleek Zero, pointing out the Thunderbolt's apparent limitations, its large size, poor turning ability, and a wide turning circle. These things would make the Thunderbolt an easy target. The strategy was simple: force the lumbering American fighter into a turning duel where it would be outmatched. One training leaflet encouraged pilots to engage with confidence. Its strength is its armor, not its speed. Despite this, there was underlying concern. Intelligence reports confirmed a growing number of P-47s arriving at Allied bases in Australia and New Guinea. They updated their sketches with new photos, estimating the plane's fuel capacity, weapons load, and vulnerable areas. The Japanese military remained skeptical, but they were vigilant. In the war rooms of the Imperial Army, people viewed the Thunderbolt as an odd, brute force solution to a problem they thought they had already solved. They were convinced that speed and agility, not size and protection, determined the outcome of air battles. Initially, they mocked it, but the memos kept coming, and the drawing of the flying tank grew larger on every map. Design philosophies: a world apart. American and Japanese engineers had very different design ideas. These ideas existed in every space, ranging from the factory floor to the cockpit. For Alexander Kartveli and his team at Republic, the key to victory was always more. More power, more armor, more guns, and more protection for the pilot. The P-47 weighed about 5 tons. More than twice the weight of the Zero. It had 8.50 caliber machine guns and a 2,000 horsepower R2800 engine. The engine was so strong it needed a turbo supercharger to function at high altitudes. This plane was crafted to withstand hits and remain operational. In Japan, Nakajima and Mitsubishi engineers approached things differently. Their fighters were light, devoid of armor, and designed for one purpose: agility. The Zero's Sake engine produced only 950 horsepower, but the plane was so light. That meant it could outmaneuver anything the Americans had in the air. The Japanese believed the pilot was the weapon and the plane was just a component of his skill. The goal was to save every ounce of weight. That would result in a tighter turn and a faster climb. Armor and self-sealing fuel tanks were seen as extras, and sometimes as unnecessary. They maintained that the best defense was avoiding getting hit in the first place. This wasn't just about aviation design, it was about distinctive approaches to problem solving. American designers had the vast industrial might of Detroit and Pittsburgh at their disposal. With that, they could afford to build a flying fortress around every pilot. Japanese engineers struggled with aluminum shortages and a culture of prioritizing speed. The result was fighters that seemed almost disposable. This resulted in two distinct concepts. The Jug was heavy, armored, and possessed mighty firepower with enough of it to destroy a bomber. The Zero was agile, graceful, and lethal when flown by a skilled pilot. Even American pilots had doubts at first. Some said it was too big for the Pacific. It was clear that it couldn't match a Zero in a turning fight. USAAF memos from early 1943 mirrored these concerns, warning that the Thunderbolt might be unable to handle the close-quarters combat over New Guinea. However, the Republic team remained committed to their approach, concentrating on power, high-altitude speed, and resilience, attributes that were needed to get a pilot home in spite of damage. While the Japanese had confidence in the pilot, the Americans trusted steel, oil, and mass production. The Japanese considered it a waste, until the day these flying tanks appeared from the clouds, guns blazing. Then the established rules of air combat were changed. August 1943, the beginning of a new kind of warfare in New Guinea. Thunderbolts rained down from the sky over New Guinea. During the battle near WWII in August 1943, American pilots pushed their planes to their limits. The pilots executed dives at speeds that stunned even seasoned Japanese pilots. Reports from the 248th Sentai told of how P-47s, despite being outnumbered, would break formation, dive, and disappear below the clouds at speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. Japanese Oscars attempted to follow, but their planes weren't designed for it. The Thunderbolt continued on. The Jug's diving speed reached almost 725 miles per hour. This made it behave more like a bomb than a fighter. American pilots regarded it as a safety net, while Japanese pilots viewed it as an escape route. Similar events occurred in the Solomons. P-47s would strike bomber formations before diving down, their engines screaming, their guns silent. Japanese pilots faced a dilemma: follow and risk damaging their planes, or stay back and watch the Thunderbolts vanish, ready to strike again. Energy fighting was a new concept for the Japanese pilots, who continued focusing on skillful flying, tight circles, and turning fights. But in a dive, physics took control. The P-47's weight, previously mocked, became an advantage. American pilots transformed the dive into an opportunity to gain speed before climbing back to safety. Japanese pilots were trained to outturn and outclimb in a fight. That meant they could not keep up. One Japanese pilot recalled shooting at their wings, but they didn't break. The message was clear: the existing methods were ineffective. Reports from Bougainville echoed this conclusion. Japanese formations were ambushed from above. Thunderbolts dove at incredible speeds. The word went back to headquarters: chasing a Jug in a dive was pointless. Pilots examined drawings of the Thunderbolt in the ready rooms. Even so, the numbers, top speed, dive recovery speed, held little value until they saw a P-47 disappear into the clouds. American pilots learned to depend on the Jug. In desperate situations, they flipped over and let gravity facilitate their escape. It worked. Japanese bullets couldn't reach them, and Japanese engines couldn't follow. The Americans were now in control of the skies by controlling their dives. The most important feature of the P-47 wasn't its guns or armor. It was its ability to dive to safety, a feat that no Japanese plane could duplicate. Beaten but unbroken. A smoking P-47 landed at Dobodura. Bullet holes covered its airframe. Ground crews found over 150 hits, some the size of a fist. The wing was damaged and the tail was partially missing. However, the engine was still running. Maintenance logs from the 348th Fighter Group told the story. One Jug landed with 3 cylinders shot off the engine, but the propeller continued to spin. Another returned with a fractured wing and leaking fluid. The pilot was understandably shaken. The mechanics weren't surprised by any of it. They'd seen this sort of carnage before. Japanese pilots were finding it hard to believe. Ki-43 Oscars and Zeros fired at Thunderbolts, concentrating on the wings, engine, and cockpit. But the typical tactics were not working. "We shot at the wings, but they didn't break." This remark was shared, each time gaining weight. Reports explained how P-47s would keep flying with missing parts. Japanese gunners, accustomed to seeing American planes crash after taking a few hits, were now seeing their bullets disappear into the armor. The frustrating outcome grew with each passing aircraft. "What kind of plane can take a 20 mm cannon hit and keep flying?" they asked. Pilots shared stories in the ready rooms. Some claimed to have seen a Thunderbolt return with half the engine gone. Another claimed to have saw a Jug lose part of its tail, but still outclimb its attackers. The expression "impossible to bring down" became commonplace. Some assumed it was by sheer luck. Others attributed it the result to American over-engineering. But there was no denying the clear evidence. The Thunderbolt survived damage that should have been impossible. The armor was everywhere, around the cockpit, behind the engine, and beneath the pilot's feet. Japanese engineers, who were working with limited resources, had made their fighters as light as possible. The P-47 was the complete opposite: tough, heavy, and built to protect the pilot. For every Jug that didn't return, 3 more landed, damaged but still flying. The numbers acted as a warning. Initiating a head-on attack against a Thunderbolt was dangerous. Even with a shot, it might not have been enough. The message was relayed through the ranks. Tactical briefings were modified in that it was recognized that bullets should not be wasted in a turning duel. People could not expect to destroy it with one shot. The old confidence was lost. In its place, there was a growing respect mixed with frustration and the awareness that everything had changed. The P-47, that once was called a flying tank, now carried that title with honor. The enemy could not break it or outlast it. To Japanese pilots, every Thunderbolt in the sky was an unsolvable problem. Every damaged Jug that safely landed validated that sentiment. Secret weapon, the unknown device. A piece of metal, scorched and stamped with English words, was carried to a workbench in Yokosuka. Japanese engineers gathered, ready to examine it. It was a turbo supercharger that came from a downed American fighter with the Pratt & Whitney markings. To the engineers, it resembled something from another planet. They began drawing diagrams, measuring the metal, and debating the function of each part. One engineer wrote, "Amazing power, a machine beyond our design." The phrase spread rapidly. The numbers were difficult to ignore. The P-47's R2800 engine, along with its turbo supercharger, reached altitudes of 41,000 feet. That was 4,000 feet higher than the Zero. At that altitude, Japanese fighters struggled while the P-47 was still climbing easily. Reports referred to the supercharger as an unknown device. It didn't seem like a standard modification to a piston engine. Upon cutting it open, they discovered that the Americans had figured out a way to address the altitude issue using power and materials that Japan was unable to access. High nickel alloys, heat-resistant seals, and precise bearings. Each component presented issues that Japanese industry couldn't resolve. Engineers warned that the Thunderbolt's power at high altitudes had changed everything. Japanese pilots had felt confident fighting above the clouds, but now they faced an enemy that climbed faster, dove deeper, and never depleted its power. The turbo supercharger wasn't just a part. It stood as a barrier between the old world of agile fighters and the new world of formidable air power. Everyone who had been making fun of the Thunderbolt's size now understood that what they had passed over was the key to American air superiority. Amazing power at 30,000 feet and higher. A secret that only those with the knowledge to build it could unlock. February 1945. Raijin, the god of thunder. The air staff convened in Tokyo in February 1945 in a smoke-filled room filled with maps. Reports from the Philippines and Iwo Jima displayed a grim picture. Squadrons were destroyed and pilots were refusing to engage. the same phrase kept being repeated. Raijin, God of Thunder. The P-47. The numbers were irrefutable. 8.50 caliber guns fired with 100 rounds per second. This created a wall of bullets that could destroy everything in its path. Pilots searched for a weak spot but were unable to find one. The historic methods of fighting were suicidal against the Thunderbolt. Survivors called it the Wall, warning that flight through it was simply impossible. The Imperial Navy's Air Staff issued Order 219. It wasn't an order to attack, but a warning. Avoid prolonging combat with Thunderbolts. Only attack if you have a clear advantage. Disengage if attacked head-on. The message showed that for the first time, Japanese pilots were being told to surrender the fight. No one was to challenge Raijin head-on. Squadron leaders read the order to their pilots. Some stared at the floor, some were in anger. Their pride vanished, replaced by frustration. The maps showed evidence of skies that had been cleared by Thunderbolts. Someone had written a new rule: avoid the Thunderbolt, live to fight another day. Morale was collapsing, the defeat of the concept of being unbeatable. This was done by an aircraft that had once been called too big to matter. The nickname Raijin circulated through the ranks. This was partly a curse and partly a prayer. Pilots whispered about the jug that couldn't be killed, also of the American wall that was impenetrable. The air war was less about achieving glory for the Imperial Navy and increasingly about survival. Every new Thunderbolt served as a reminder of defeat. Epilogue. In the Pacific, weight became an advantage. By the end of 1943, Japanese reports were calling the P-47 Thunderbolt a flying tank. However, US records revealed it shot down more than 20 enemy planes for every one lost. Japanese engineers struggled to comprehend the turbo supercharger, labeling its high-altitude capabilities a mystery device. In February 1945, Air Staff Order 219 directed pilots to avoid fighting Thunderbolts whenever possible. While hundreds of Japanese intelligence documents are in existence, we don't know just how much the High Command took into account the mental impact of the P-47. But it is obvious that the same plane that had been labeled as too heavy caused the enemy to reconsider their ways. Records show that the Thunderbolt's size and firepower reshaped air combat.